Hello and welcome to Off Label, the podcast where we celebrate the power of marketing in the pharma industry and beyond. And I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick Penzo today.
Hello, thanks
Hi,
for having
Patrick.
me.
Patrick, you are head of marketing at Omnia. And in preparation for today's discussion, you and I had a little chat. And one of the things you talked about was product marketing and growth marketing. Now, I have a pretty good idea about what they are. You have direct experience of what they are, but can you both share that experience, but also explain to everybody what the difference is?
So I think of like marketing having basically three pillars. So your foundations, which is what product marketing does, which is basically understanding who is your customer, what pain points do they have, if you're targeting businesses, firmographics, if you're targeting people, kind of demographics, content, which is your fuel. That's basically what you're going to use to burn and get attention and knowledge and thought leadership out there.
Yeah.
And then your engines, which is growth marketing, which is what you do to burn that fuel. So it's basically the distribution channels that you employ to actually get that content out there. And those three pillars kind of work together in a really high functioning marketing business.
Yeah.
I personally have come from a background of working in sales. I started as employee number 10 at a very small company at the time called Onfido. It exited as a very successful exit in the UK just a
And
few
tell
years
me,
ago.
you had equity and you're now a millionaire?
I won't say millionaire, but it did do okay.
You did
so
all right. Okay,
I'm
good.
doing okay with that one. It was my first job out of university, and I
Oh,
just
so you properly lucked out.
I just assumed that was what tech was.
And how is the day-to-day now? Is that quite
It's slightly different.
Slightly different. Yeah.
I left Onfido to go and do it all over again at another startup, and
Right.
after 6 months, it wasn't quite going to work
Not
out.
rolling the money.
I had to readjust to reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say kind of with Onfido, I really started on that foundation side.
Yeah.
And over other experiences, I've kind of built up more of that knowledge on the growth side. But I think of those two as kind of the two polar opposite ends of the spectrum of marketing.
Yeah.
And they're really essential to one another, right? So if you're going to distribute anything, you need to make sure that you're sending the right message to the right person. So in a way, product marketing is kind of like the strategy and the person directing the cannon, and growth marketing is the one firing the missiles.
Firing this. Yeah, it's, I mean, I think in pharma, so that's where I kind of, the world in which I inhabit, we don't think of it in those terms. We think about sort of strategic marketing, which I'm hearing is more the product side, because the product is the product in most instances. When most marketers get a pharmaceutical product, you can't change it. It is what it is. There's very little you can do with it. So we tend to focus more on the growth side about how do you actually get it to the right people. That said, there's often a big gap in terms of understanding the fundamentals, which is who is our customers, what do they want, what's the pain point, what's the behavioral shift we're trying to drive. But in your world, you're in the B2B space, correct? So what is that balance between the product marketing and the growth marketing? Where's that? What sort of happy medium? Or are you effectively saying we need it all?
I mean, you do need it all in practice because you're just serving different parts of the business. If you know exactly who to target, but you don't distribute any content to them, then no one's going to hear about you. So you do need everything. I guess the way that I would think about it for tech specifically is I've worked at multiple tech companies now, and every time I try to explain to my mum what I do, and she has no idea. Right?
That is the acid test of job descriptions. Does your mum understand it?
So most tech solutions out there are in this kind of niche thing that even people in the industry might not fully understand what it is and what it's doing. I would argue that actually with pharmaceuticals, there's something in there as well, right? So I as a patient don't necessarily want medicine XYZ. I want a solution to my particular pain or problem. Yeah. And I think that's where product marketing is so fundamental, and that's where kind of I come from. That's why I think it's quite an important bit, because you can really tap into the true emotional power. So, especially on kind of B2C worlds, but it's true across the board. We as human beings resonate when there's a genuine like emotional connection with something. That's the most powerful bit. I think that's where you see the delta between a company and a product that does well versus a company that does amazingly well. If you think about Airbnb and travel, it really ties into like an emotional reaction, which has led it to be a very successful company, more so than alternatives in the market.
Do you think most marketers fundamentally understand that that is important, regardless of whether it's B2C, B2B, or anything else?
I think they do. I feel like marketers do understand that. I think, and this is down to my hate that we'll talk about later, but I think the main problem is that we're so focused on metrics and results and performance that we lose track of the creative element, or we sacrifice on brand for the sake of performance. I think that's where marketers get challenged with the reality of every day.
We're straight into this brand versus brand versus performance. So I've been working in marketing long enough to know when sort of performance marketing as we now know it really didn't exist. You didn't have multi-channel, you didn't have omni-channel, you didn't have any of that, to this world now where we're just drowning in data and we almost don't know what to do with it. So what's the right balance between brand building and or performance marketing?
That is going to depend entirely on your business, your industry, your market, your competition. In my experience, I'm currently working at Omnia in procurement. So we help businesses manage all their suppliers.
Yeah.
It's a place that is getting a ton of investment right now. There's a lot of players. Some are very old, some are quite new. It's a very active and dynamic space. Most industries that have AI attached to them have like many competitors.
Yeah.
Brand is a really critical aspect to differentiating in a very crowded market, particularly if your solutions are young and immature. Like we're quite lucky that we're now, we've got a solid level of product development behind us, but especially earlier stage companies are going to really have to differentiate on brand to really build that credibility and trust.
And does it also prevent you build that barrier to other entries because people just trust it?
Yeah, I think trust is such a fundamental. I mean, I think the dawn of fintech in the UK was all the companies that actually did it, Monzo, Revolut, they all invested a lot in becoming trustworthy, and they put a lot in brand. That said, performance is still essential, right? We still need to see a return on investment. So there's always a balance there. There are other industries where that performance element is far more important than that brand element.
So give me an example of an industry where that's the case.
I would say where you're going to see it best is where you can tightly connect the revenue to the spend. So anything that's short sales cycles, you can almost immediately, some businesses that will advertise on Instagram and sell a product, e-commerce, for example, will probably have a tight turnaround time between spending the money and seeing a return on it. And so they can do very easy calculations, right? If I amp this up, then I'm going to see this much more come in. And so then brand and, all the soft things are just fuel to kind of get more out of this same channel.
Right.
I've always worked in industries where the spend on the marketing and the revenue closed involves a salesperson. There's lots of touch points and lots of stakeholders. So I it's really hard to demonstrate how marketing that has touched 6 or 7 people, maybe 10 or 20 people in a business, has influenced the ultimate decision to go with one vendor over another.
Yeah. So that whole piece around ROI just seems to be almost as old as the hills. Marketers, I think, have always struggled to prove, particularly to CFOs, like they'll go, but what do we get? And you're like, well, we can't directly prove it, but you'll know it when you see it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of my hypotheses is that's why performance marketing has actually kind of taken off recently, is because whether it does demonstrate pure ROI or whether it just makes it feel like you're demonstrating ROI, makes it more attractive than brand, where it's harder, I would argue. I mean, I don't know, do you see it the same way?
I would kind of be careful not to confuse two things. I think there's awareness building, which I think brand is more than that. But if we're thinking about kind of on a growth marketing lens, you've got raising awareness around your business, then you've got like capturing the demand of people who are ready to buy and funding those in. I think part of what we're talking about here is like a lot of performance tends to work very well on that second tier. And like, there are, again, for some business, it's easier to show how the awareness drove into kind of the bottom of the funnel. But so I'd be careful to say, brand sits outside of that in a broader sense. But if we're talking about like how much do you put focus on awareness versus that kind of capture of demand, that's a challenging one, because I mean, again, this age-old thing of you can spend all your money capturing people, but then your funnel of people available is going to run very dry because you haven't let other people know that you exist.
Yeah.
So it's a very short-term mindset.
Yeah.
I love Clay for this, Clay.ai. I think there's a conversation between their CEO and their CFO, kind of around marketing and how the CFO is very open-minded to spending money in kind of crazy unmeasurable ways.
Well, like experimenting.
Experimenting,
yeah.
but kind of also accepting that you can't measure everything, but kind of looking for an intent. So like they gave the example of out of home, they do billboards in a city, and you can't expect to measure exactly what that billboard does. But what they'll look for is, for example, let's do billboards in this city and not any other city in America for this 3-4 week month campaign. And then let's see if that is tied to a spike in website visits.
Right.
So then you can start making this kind of correlation type measurements.
Even though it's indirect and you can't prove it, it's more like, well, it looks like
there's something there. And you can kind of trust that there's some level of human gut that is still acceptable with these things.
Yeah. Interesting. When we were chatting ahead of today, you said something that you guys do, which I thought was very interesting, which is you tend to do more events. You're very in-person led rather than more digitally led. Tell me about that as to why that works and why you're, not doing some of the more digital stuff, which all seems to be very sort of the rage and almost like you've got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say we're not unique. I think there is a trend that I'm spotting, at least within specific tech companies in the kind of B2B space, of moving more into events. So why does it work for us? I think for us specifically, we are a very sales-led organization. We target fairly large contract values, very large organizations. Yeah. So we're a very high touch type of deal. So there's always a salesperson involved. And where we've come from historically is a lot of the pipeline that we've generated has come from a salesperson reaching out to a business to say, hey, can we do business? Cold calling. Yeah. Versions of. So events actually work very, very well as a complement to that very heavy sales-led outbound motion, where instead of cold calling and say, hey, can I do a demo? It's like, hey, would you like to come to this event? It's a much warmer kind of invitation. You can build a relationship. Yeah. And obviously for later down the funnel, they're great moments for conversion, for accelerating a deal. Yeah. So for us, those are kind of like the key fundamentals why they work. I think what I'm seeing a lot of, at least sort of in the tech companies I'm looking at, is your traditional digital channels just aren't working the way they used to, kind of especially with the advent of AI. Everyone's just seeing that the spend that they had on ads just isn't delivering what it used to. It's kind of like saturated markets, too many people trying to grab attention on ads. And so it's like, how do you stand out? And so in some ways, I'm seeing people are going back to old school ways of human physical contact. Yeah. Because it's where you can still build like a significant, you can differentiate at a personal level, person to person.
I think that's fascinating. I think if I look at how AI is obviously shaping the landscape, the marketing landscape, the advertising landscape, there's so much slop out there that it's getting to the point where I think just people are just starting to disengage. They're just like, there's so much out there. It's just too much. And you just think, well, maybe it's just easier if I just don't engage at all. Yeah. And I wonder if that is part of that sort of almost that sort of trend of authenticity, that actually it's better if you just meet people, because you people buy from people.
Yeah. The way I've been thinking about it recently, I was reading an article somewhere, and it's like people actually don't have short attention spans. So someone can sit through an hour-long podcast, you can watch you can binge a Netflix series over multiple hours. So it's not the attention span is getting shorter, it's your consideration span. So it's how much time do you actually dedicate to assess whether to spend your time on something or not. And obviously in a physical environment, your consideration span is, do I go to this event? Oh, there are these 3 factors that mean there are these people going, or there are these brands showing, or it's this venue. Yeah. And so you're like, fine, I'll go. Once you're there, you're a captive audience, right? And so your openness to consideration is greater, and you're able to then go a lot deeper than you can with just an image ad on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Yeah. So I think it's being able to find the right to be considered is the challenging thing in marketing, which is why I think brand is so important, because that's what brands should be focused on.
Yeah. In the pharma world, I mean, companies are, even now, they're still getting to grips with multi-channel and even omni-channel, right? It's not universal. And I certainly, when I started my career, I was a sales rep. Like, I'm literally going around GP practices and pressing the flesh. And I wonder if that trend of being more impersonal is something eventually is going to wash through to pharma. That is an interesting one. Interesting. So you said that raising awareness is a really key goal of yours. Mm-hmm. What does that look like day to day?
Sitting in a corner and crying. No.
If anybody wants to do marketing, you just heard how brilliant it is.
No, what does it involve? It depends what we mean by what we're trying to do. So again, very specific to us and our sector and our industry. Procurement businesses, particularly in those large organizations, do spend a lot of time considering analysts, for example. So I talk about analysts as the influencer marketers of B2B. Yeah. So we think about companies like Gartner, Forrester, IDC. These are kind of firms that give you a shortcut to evaluating. It's the kind of classic IBM problem. No one got fired for buying IBM. Yeah. Analysts kind of play that kind of role where they can help businesses make a business case for something and shortcut that sales cycle. So for us, that like an external validation and credibility is quite critical. So we invest a lot of time finding impartial or actually impartial third parties to assess us and place us within the space that we want to play in.
Okay.
If I talk a bit more broadly about Omnia, so when I joined, there was a marketing team of one who was kind of doing everything. Poor guy, Nick, he's great. But there's only so much you can do. And we were not the first player on the block, right? So there were companies that are 5 or 6 years old. We're coming in as a 3-year-old company trying to get noticed. And that might sound like a very short time span, but within the sector that we work in, that's almost a decade or two of advantage. Yeah. So we needed to come into the foreground as a company that is in this category that's still slightly being defined, and everyone's trying to work out exactly what is it that these companies have in common. So we need to play into that to finish standing in a category. That's where analysts are very helpful. We had to say, look, this is who we are and this is how we're different. That is a lot of plugging into the voice of the customer and explaining why we do get selected and why have companies chosen us and what do they see as being particularly special about our solution that they don't like about other solutions. And then really building that into kind of a strong messaging engine that can mean that there's a strong reason why we're different. And then the third thing that we've done a lot of is investing in things like awards. So again, the polar opposite side of analysts is this kind of flashy alerts that just make us sound and look cool. So everything, but it's true. They're like, I don't know, awards are worth what they're worth. Like there's some level of reason to it, but it's mostly if you apply and you put a good business case together and there are enough signals that you're doing well, you'll start getting awards. We're lucky also because we've grown at an incredible rate. So we hit annual recurring revenue targets that take companies on average 5 years, like top quartile of companies will do it in 4 years. Yeah. We did it in just over 2 years. So we have been growing ridiculously fast. So we deserve to win awards. And so there is some raw data there to prove it, but it's also, again, marketing, it's positioning, it's finding the right proof points and applying and just getting those awards. Yeah. And then enough of those awards stack up and you start seeing a story of like, oh gosh, this is an up and coming company. I keep seeing them. And then the analysts get involved and say, well, this is the up and coming company.
Obviously they're the ones.
And and then you also have the advantage that, and I realize I'm rambling here, so maybe you don't care about any of this, but we also have the advantage that because we're not the first mover, we can see the positions they've taken, we can see the weaknesses of those positions. And, practically we have some advantages from not being the first. So we don't have the technical debt that some of our competitors have. And that means that we're in a position to create some quite strong positioning that can quite be difficult to displace.
I think in pharma, there's a bit of a mantra of, be first to market. And there's quite a few instances of actually where that's hurt the company that was first to market because they're shaping the market. The customers don't know about the class. You have to do all the hard work. And then companies come second or third to market and go, well, we're just kind of copying most of what they do and then find out what that point of differentiation is a different segment, blah, 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 blah. And it sounds like it's similar for you
That
guys.
is our position. That's what the CEO has always said when I joined the company. He was like, well, all these companies spend so many millions on educating the market. We now just come in and take it without spending all those millions. And I'm like, yes, that there's absolutely a strategy, and that's what we have to do given the position that we are.
Yeah.
But there's also the other side to this, which is particularly with a new problem space, if a brand gets associated with the pain, and if you think pain point brand, that's going to be a very hard exercise. It's always going to be the question of like, why not this company?
Yeah.
And that's what you always end up fighting against. So that's where education still is quite important, or like really nailing that differentiation around, they were great, they came first, they helped build this space, but this is why they're doing these things wrong. And like that's where the education needs to play. You can't not educate.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a big believer that marketing, we're in the fundamental business of driving change. Like you're changing somebody, different behaviors from one thing to the next. And that we as humans are really very irrational when it comes to why we do things. We might post-rationalize why we do things. But do you see it the same way in, what you do, B2B, obviously complex sales cycles, long sales cycles, but what's that level of balance of sort of very rational arguments of this product does this and it costs this versus, well, I just think we should go for Omnia or whoever?
I think, again, it depends where you are in the market, right? So like if we think about our top competitors, they can afford to just hire super famous celebrity, spend a lot of money on it.
Just throw money at it.
Throw money at the thing because they're just showing off that they are the big players in the space.
Yeah.
And then they can back it up with, a strong set of logos and admittedly some very strong functionality.
Yeah.
So obviously we can't play that same game. We don't have the same amount of money they do. We're not starting from the same point. So we do need something true and meaningful to stand out. We can't just come in and say, but there's one company in the space that's, I think is a little bit doing this. They're just coming in with like a brand-led approach where they're just saying, we're great.
Just pure assertion.
And it's an assertion.
Yeah, right.
Obviously they've specialized, they have some level of product built behind it to back it, but they're trying to go for this kind of impression first approach. Yeah. And I think it's going to be really hard, especially if you're second mover, you need to prove why you're better.
Yeah.
So I've always been a big believer in building from reality and building from true proof points, because the risk is that at some point you'll end up in something washing, whether it's, greenwashing or some other kind of, now people start talking about agent washing, that everything's an agent, but then it doesn't mean anything. And people build skepticism up very quickly. So if you can be rooted in reality and, call bullshit, and you can be recognized for being that brand that maybe wasn't quite as flashy, I think that can be a very strong position to come from. Or even a brand that's very flashy, but was always rooted in reality is going to be much harder to displace because you actually have proof points.
Yeah.
But again, if you're first mover, you don't have much competition and you can tell everyone everything and promise the dreams and hope that eventually you can catch up to those dreams. Lots of companies have done that. It doesn't always pay off.
I think that bullshit detection, which I think humans are really good at, right? I think that's where marketing, and I would extend it to sales as well, like lets sales and marketing professionals down. Yeah. Because there's plenty of companies out there, and that's what they're based on. It's based on absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And it sort of tarnishes, I think, marketing professionals with this same brush of, you're just in the kind of the bullshit game. And it's just not that at all.
Yeah.
And it's not just, and you're the guys to do the adverts. I'm like, no, God, no, we're not. Yeah. There's so much more than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the whole bullshit thing is quite interesting. I want to just understand something from your perspective around how, when you get lots of insights and or data, admittedly there are a spectrum, there's just a lot of noise in that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you separate that noise from a signal that you're like, yeah, we really have to act on this thing to use complex analytics? Like how do you do that?
Well, so we have the advantage that we don't start from a place of lots of data and lots of tools. I mean, we have way too many tools as it is, classic tech company, but compared to a big established corporation, we don't quite have the volumes of data that other organizations have. So we might be bringing in a tool for the first time and starting from zero. So we can choose, do we read 100% of these data points or do we pick 2 or 3 to start from?
Right.
In practice, you'll often find you're only looking for 2 or 3 really meaningful signals. That kind of like classic 80-20 rule.
But at the start, you don't know what those 3 are.
You don't know, and so it makes more sense to say, well, let's use engage the brain. Let's make some assumptions about what we are going to look at and why these things matter. Let's start with these. Do they actually drive the kind of things that we thought they were going to drive? If yes, let's keep tracking them.
More. Yeah.
If no, ignore them, move on, kind of thing. So very, very basic version of this is we try and drive signals to the sales team around who they should proactively go and contact.
Cold or
cold?
But you're effectively saying they're a warm lead.
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
Well, so we're not saying this person has engaged with our marketing enough times that we consider them an MQL. Here you are. Let's call them SQL, SAL. Dance and fight over this.
Yeah.
What we're basically just saying is this particular signal suggests that this is a person you should prioritize contacting. Okay. That could be this person has just joined the company in this role, so they are building out their next 90-day plan. This is the perfect time to talk to them about their 90-day plan. Yeah,
because they're receptive.
They're completely cold, but there's some kind of signal there.
Yeah.
Probably more a trigger than a signal, if you like. There's something that suggests that you should go and do something. Another one that we're playing around with now is they've looked at us on G2, but they haven't come to our website yet. Well, they are at least kind of shopping around for alternatives, or they're looking at us. That might be a signal to say, look, this company's actually closer to an RFP than a company that's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So there are tiers of signals. There's direct signals you control on your own product or website, signals on like second party platforms, and then signals that are very loose, but like someone's engaging on our LinkedIn regularly, they're commenting, this is a person that you could probably reach out to. Yeah. Things that you can quickly build out so many signals that you then need some like complex algorithm to piece them all together.
Yeah.
So we have 2 Slack channels. One just sends all these signals. We've worked out who's come to our website, contact them. Or someone at this company has come to this website, contact everyone in this company. And it's just thousands and thousands of messages a day. Right. And there's another Slack channel which has like 3 types of notifications. It's a very, very specific set of tasks. In practice, in that busy, noisy Slack channel, there probably are some really good inputs, and there probably are some signals that are driving deals. And so like some people might say, oh, but I want all those signals just in case I get that one good deal out of it. I'm like, great. But actually on the other channel, we can actually look at these particular signals, and we can have conversations around particular deals and how the signal did or didn't help. And and it actually drives more meaningful change across the whole business, because it's not just about finding the right signals. It's about building the right process around that signal to take the right action items.
And that's very human led. You're not using AI to do any of this. Just experience.
Yeah, mostly experience, conversation. We have quite a distributed team, so a lot of decisions happen almost at the individual level. So it's quite
quite autonomous. What's the word? Empowered.
Yeah, there's a very empowered process. Okay. Very hard to scale. But that's where you can really capture that's where we stand out compared to alternatives, that we can be very, very specific and very targeted to a business, because we will operate on quite a fragmented level, distributed level. It's a nightmare for marketing, but it's great for sales.
Great for the business.
And so we'd like to start introducing more things. Like we're kind of starting to play around with this, but like things where, for example, we make recommendations to the sales team based on these signals and this particular behavior. And
this is you as a human making recommendations. There's
no, so like AI driven. So we want to say, I don't know, this person has just signed up for a demo, but just so you know, they did these things and they've say these things. We know from previous deals in our CRM that this is where you left the conversation off last time. It was another salesperson that was speaking to them, but this is the full picture. Our recommendation is that you reach out with this kind of message. Next best action, exactly right.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the direction that we like to take, but still leave ultimately the fundamental judgment to the individual human to decide what the best course of action
So the
is.
robots are not taking over yet.
No, I don't know if they ever will. I actually would like to delegate government to robots. But,
that is another topic
I'm
probably
ready for
another.
robot overlords.
The overlords are coming. Robot overlords, if you're listening, you've got a fan right here. So actually thinking about the future, what do you think the future of marketing looks like? So I talked about AI slop, and like there's this sort of overload of just content, and some of it's really crap. But what do you think, 5 to 10 years from now, what's going to be different? What's going to be the same in marketing?
Yeah, good question. I think, again, we probably slightly hard to generalize for all types of marketing, for all industries, for all go-to-market models.
Yeah.
I think probably what's going to be the same is there isn't a rule book for everyone and for everything. You're going to have to always experiment and work out what works for your particular niche. I think what we are seeing is just the pace at which things can be copied, the pace at which things go from being original to, I've heard this enough times, is like shrinking incredibly fast.
Yeah.
So there's much more pressure on marketing to find the real meaningful things that matter. So again, like that's why it's so important to plug into like the real concrete things about your product. There's some things that move slowly, like product development.
Yeah.
And so the more, even if a company changes their positioning, if the product can't live up to that positioning, eventually that's going to hurt that company. Yeah. So the more you can be plugged into what's actually truly really there, the better. And I think that's why you're seeing product marketing increasingly being important in tech, where it's especially easy to build a competitor.
Yeah.
And I think just the pressure on creativity is going to go up. I think companies that actually, and leadership that understands and engages with the importance of a emotional connection, like an emotional element. The people that basically really engage with what brand is will have an advantage, because it's going to be so hard to distinguish. Everything else, the tensions, again, like the consideration spans are going to get shorter and shorter. Yeah. There's just going to be so much to consider that people will more likely react to
like an emotional connection rather than
something that resonates with them and sounds true for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that online there's the McKinsey report. I don't know whether you saw it around how CMOs in Europe are prioritizing brand almost over everything else, which I think is a really interesting trend. And John Hegarty, like he posts a lot about creativity being the. Now, of course, he'd say that, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm having this big echo chamber moment on LinkedIn, but I think that creative spark is, I think, well, number one, is very innately human, and two, but just going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's like you can smell the kind of the bullshit. Like you can go. Now maybe when your goal of the robot overlords come and take us over, we won't be able to tell fact from fiction. But I think for the foreseeable, that originality I think is very important.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good thought, like a good view on that. Because like it's not also just not about the moment in time. Like I really do think that another thing, we was kind of talking about it earlier, marketing, especially in early stage companies, is effectively the strategy department of a business. Typically, you can't afford to have a strategy team. And so marketing is the only one really thinking not just about next week and next quarter, but next year, the next 10 years. Yeah. And so if you have a brand, a positioning, a place, these are things that once you've convinced the whole world of this thing, it's very hard to convince everyone of something else. Yeah. And so you really need to be very clear on where you're going and why you're going that direction.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where you can have the short-term win, but if you're thinking about it in a long-term mindset and you're trying to build long-term value as a marketer, that is where the telling fact from fiction is I still believe humans will get there, right? You might not immediately be able to call bullshit, but you will be able to over 5 years. Yeah. And brand can like completely burn in that process.
Yeah. So we're getting towards the end of the session. I want to move into our regular slot of hate, rate, and debate. Yeah. So this is where I ask you what you hate, rate, and would think you, I, and the broader marketing team should debate. What do you hate? Something you really dislike?
Oh, what I was going to say is like when you focus on attribution and numbers so much that it comes at the cost of creativity.
Because that number over there has gone up, which means we shouldn't be doing all this.
Yeah,
stuff.
or you're so indexing on capturing the leads and capturing the deals that you lose track of the long-term view of like we need to convince the next 1,000 people to talk to us
earlier up in the process. Yeah.
So I think maybe that's also like partly the kind of area that I work in, that typically we are, I work in companies that are short-termist inherently because they have a burn rate and they will run out of money if they don't. But I hate it when people don't engage on how can we start building something long-termist.
Yeah. What about something you really rate, something you think's great about marketing?
I really rate the current trend towards old school stuff.
As someone who I suspect is older than you, amen. Yes, so do I. Yeah.
I just love that Times New Roman is kind of coming back on certain brands.
Brilliant.
I love that events are like a thing. We're like, I feel like, those movies where they're futuristic, but everything is sort of 1950s technology, but they can teleport or something. Yeah. I feel like we're going into that direction. I'm kind of here for it.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, a side story. I was... my daughter is obsessed by North Face. She's 14. And I looked on their website and it said 1996 retro North Face jackets. I'm thinking, for me, 47, that ain't retro. I lived that originally. Made me feel so old. But I do take your point that maybe
I just see us being trendy. That's all.
There we go. I should tell my daughter that.
Is trendy an old-fashioned word?
I don't know anymore. I don't know. I have no idea. What about something we should debate as marketers?
Yeah, I am so curious about what skill set I should have. Basically.
Wow. Okay. And you're saying this is an experienced marketer.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Tell me more.
When I think about how I've kind of gone up the ladder, I think it's often been as more of a generalist than it has been as a specialist. Okay. And yet I do feel the weakness sometimes of like not being specialized enough in certain areas that I have to see.
Yeah.
And so kind of I'm asking myself, so I'm looking around like asking myself what is the right build for a person in the world of AI and for a marketer in this world. And I think the other thing that's also happening is that you're seeing agencies come back a lot more, freelancers come back a lot more. And so I think my question has now become, what is the skill set that an in-house marketer needs? Right. And I think we're looking for increasingly sort of like generalists that are good at one thing in particular, but are quite good across the board, and then can lean on external specialists in a lot of different areas.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining Off Label today. And thank you for watching and or listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Some really great insights from Patrick about marketing outside of the pharma world. And if you think you would like to be a guest, or you can think of a great guest to join us at Off Label, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And as always, please give us a like, a reshare on your social channels. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you so much.